It's baffled scholars for 2 millennia. It is a puzzle made of multi-dimensional elements, an enigma with roots that reach back to the dawning of time, perhaps before. Daniel explained part of it. Ezekiel and Isaiah had glimpses into it. John saw it all for the time of the end. That time is now. Join Derek and Sharon Gilbert on a journey that spans the course of history, from Eden to Mount Hermon, from Hermon to Babel, from Babel to Rome, from Rome to the cross, and from there to us. Biblical prophecy is coming true before your eyes, and to understand it, you must discern the times both then and now. It's time to unravel the threads of this all-encompassing prophetic paradox. It's time to unravel Revelation.
The 200 million demon army. Welcome to Unraveling Revelation from Skywatch TV. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and we are trying out a new sound system here in Studio G1.
So if there are any oddities in the audio this week, you can blame the new experimental microphones.
Yeah,
but
not our fault.
It's the equipment. Yeah, it's always the
blame
equipment, right. Well, we've got an interesting subject today. I mean, this is something that scholars of end times prophecy have really wrestled with for a long, long time. Who are these things that kill a third of humanity in the end times?
Well, here's the deal. We have been talking about this sort of leading up to it for weeks.
Yeah.
We started this before the Christmas break. So we've tried to give you some background into what was the purpose of visions at specific places and why this follows the drying up of the Euphrates River and the unchaining and the unbinding of 4 angels, identities unknown, 4 fallen entities who've been bound in the river Euphrates for who knows how long, since pre-flood days, I would guess.
That would be a good guess.
That would be a good guess. And now we're finally back to identifying the 200 million. Hint, they're not Chinese.
Right. We alluded to this a couple of weeks ago in pointing out that the Chinese military, despite the fact that they've got, over a billion, 1.6 billion citizens, their army still is only about 3 million, which is still a lot. It's far more than any other army on the planet. But nowhere near the 200 million that are described in Revelation chapter 9. So that being the case, who are they? Well, we talked about that last week with the Euphrates being a symbolic representation of the boundary between the natural realm and the spirit realm. And ultimately, when we're reading through end times prophecy in the Bible, Revelation, Ezekiel, Isaiah, Zechariah, Zephaniah, et cetera, we're dealing with a supernatural conflict, and we have to keep that in view. And I think one thing that end times prophecy teachers often do, and I am guilty of this as much as anybody else, is trying to figure out who in the natural realm is equated to these symbols that we read about in Scripture, when in fact some of these symbols are less symbolic and more, real than we've been taught.
Yeah, we all do that. We've all read expositions on the Book of Revelation or any prophecy, and seen how many of us have tried to naturalize it. I include myself in that.
Sure.
But I think that, again, the clue here is that there are 4 entities bound in that river. So these are spirit entities. I would say that they might be the generals of the 200 million.
That would be a really good guess. The Bible is not explicit on that, and so we use the word guess deliberately because really that's all we can do is look at the clues and make our best analysis, but we don't know for certain. It would seem that they are directing the activities because it's after they are released that these troops, the 4 angels who had been prepared for the hour, the day, the month, and the year, were released to kill a third of mankind.
Yes. And these entities kill a third of mankind.
Right. That's verse 15. Verse 16 then just goes right into the number of mounted troops was twice 10,000 times 10,000. I heard their number. Well, that's John saying it's 200 million.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
four angels are clearly directing the activity of these 200 million.
They really are, and we're going to get to try to identify them in a few minutes. But first, I want to tell you something that occurred to me this morning as I was reading through all of this and trying to decide what direction I wanted to take on it. It reminded me, and you can tell me I'm crazy about this. You can too. It reminded me of the fact that we've got 7 trumpets and a region just the other side of a nether realm. When Joshua took Jericho, there were 7 priests with 7 shofars, 7 trumpets, that were blown over the course of 6 days, and then the 7th day they all shouted, and the walls came tumbling down. It strikes me as really interesting that we've almost got the Lord saying, oh, and by the way, when we get to that 6th trumpet, because this is the 6th trumpet, is it not?
Yes, it is.
Prepare for something major. But it's a reversal. Instead of the Lord coming and taking down a city that is dedicated to a fallen entity, the moon god, and wiping out the demons that are in it, he's allowing demons to come in and invade the Holy Land.
Yes. This is a precursor to what we see later in Revelation 19, which is Armageddon. And I would suggest that this army, after it kills a third of humanity, will be among that group that gathers to do battle at Armageddon. What also is interesting, and I've been just stumbled on this the other day as I was working on my forthcoming book, Saturn's Reign.
We've got lots of forthcoming books.
We do. Again, Tom Horn is such a slave driver. Oh.
And got some great coffee here.
We couldn't have a better boss on this earth than Tom Horn.
Amen to that.
The definition of Avarim, and in your Bible that's spelled Abarim. That's the name of the mountain range. Used to be in Moab, now it's in Jordan, just along the east side of the Dead Sea. Ezekiel puts the final battle of the War of Gog and Magog in the valley of the travelers, but the word travelers comes from the same root as Avarim, the name of those mountains, which includes Mount Nebo. God tells Moses, in fact, to climb this mountain of the Avarim. Well, what is Avarim? It means travelers. Travelers in the sense that entities who travel from the realm of the dead to the land of the living, those who cross over. And there's an 1899 encyclopedia, the Encyclopedia Biblica, by a couple of scholars, Shane and Black, Cheyne, and they defined the word Avarim as literally meaning those on the other side. But looking at it from a naturalistic perspective, they assumed that from the perspective of the Hebrews, Avarim meant, those mountains on the other side of the Jordan River. But in this context, I think if we're looking at this from a supernatural perspective, because this newer definition of equating it to the travelers and then finding pagan texts from the time of the judges that identify the spirits of the Rephaim, demons, as travelers, we now have better context to interpret what the word Avarim means. I think Shane and Black were very close to the meaning, those on the other side of the Jordan, meaning those on the other side of the veil between the land of the living and the land of the dead. So in a sense, the Jordan River there is like the Euphrates, in that it's a border between the land of the dead and the land of the living.
I know. You and I have been talking about this for some time. That is, there's something about that whole rift area. The Jordan is part of that rift that seems to have a huge amount of supernatural activity.
Right. And that's another forthcoming book from the two of us later this year.
Is that the one that Tom chose? We pitched a bunch of books and he said, I want these two.
Yeah, that's one of the two that he...
Okay.
But we're blessed and honored that he wants to publish this research that we're doing. We find it fascinating. So for us, this is not like work. This is amazing.
It's like being a kid in a candy store.
Because archaeology is an amazing thing. And it helps us to understand some of these weird references and images that we find in the Bible. And especially when we can connect it to end times prophecy, it gets so exciting.
You know what else is exciting? This book right here.
Yes. That's the thing.
Not particularly that edition, but the Bible.
The Bible.
In the original languages. When you start really digging in there and seeing what is hidden behind the English.
Right. That's the key. We have to dig deeper into not just the original languages, the Greek, the Hebrew, and the Aramaic, but also look for loan words from other languages, because the Hebrews, just like we English speakers, borrow things from French and Italian and Spanish and Japanese. The Hebrews would borrow things from Akkadian, Aramaic,
Egyptian.
Greek, Egyptian. So we've got things that we're understanding better now as scholars and archaeologists have dug out the text and found, oh, here's how the Egyptians use this word, and it sounds just like this word in Hebrew that Isaiah used. So
Isaiah loves wordplay.
He did, yes. And so as we get deeper into this study, I don't think we'll ever run out of this material for this program.
We are never, and again, because if you're new to this, welcome. We don't only look at the book of Revelation. We try to look at all Revelation, because the entire Bible is the Lord revealing himself.
And it all leads to what we see in the book of Revelation. It's all about his return and the establishment of justice on this earth, and the creation of the new heaven and the new earth, the new Jerusalem here on planet Earth, and our restoration to his divine family, the divine council, his family. We are the prodigal children returning home and being welcomed back by the fathers. That's what this is all about.
That is amazing. By the way, really quickly, in the news, and this is relevant because of the location, in the news, the U.S. is moving assets from Iraq into Syria.
Crossing the Euphrates.
Yes, and we actually will have soldiers there. It's not just materiel, it's people.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see what President Biden does with all of this. And he'll be here for the next 4 years, I presume. He said he's going to serve one term only.
Yep.
Beyond that, we don't know. But if Tom Horn's scenario, his timeline is correct, in the next 5 years, a lot of really interesting things are going to happen. In fact, even sooner than that.
Yes, just 4 years out, we're going to be a little over 4 years out. We're going to be at the 3.5 years away from the arrival of asteroid Apophis, and that
which
3.5 year
arrives
period.
in April of 2029.
April 29, October of 2025, 3.5 years to the day is the seventh day of the Feast of Tabernacles, or Sukkot. So, yeah, there are a lot of interesting...
What we're saying is that many of these things, they may start actually happening.
Yes.
Really kicking in high gears. So, if you wanted to get conspiratorial, you could ask, okay, they're probably there to protect the pipelines. That's the official story. But is it possible that there's more going on in Syria than we're told?
Well, yeah, this is one of the things that I'm going to explore a little in the forthcoming book, Saturn's Reign, because Saturn, or Kronos to the Greeks, was also Enlil to the Sumerians and Dagon to the Amorites who lived along the Euphrates River, what the scholars call the Middle Euphrates, which is the Euphrates River inside modern Syria, from the border with Iraq up to the border with Turkey. There were two major cult centers of the god Dagon, and he occupied the same slot in the pantheon, if you will. There was a consistent belief among people in the ancient Near East that there was a sky god who was more or less retired or had been deposed by Uranus, or Anu for the Sumerians, had been overthrown by Kronos, Saturn, or just deposed, or just took over when the sky god decided to retire. Enlil then took over. Dagon, the same thing. El for the Canaanites, same thing. And then that entity was replaced by a storm god or weather god called Baal or Zeus or Marduk or Jupiter, essentially the same entity by different names. And this was consistent among the cultures from Iran to Rome, I mean, including the Hurrians and the Hittites. And even if you look at the Norse pantheon, where Odin was eventually replaced by Thor, who was a storm god. And by the way, you ever wonder why Thor carried a hammer instead of like a sword or a battle axe like, most good Norse soldiers? It's because the older versions of the weather god, Baal, was depicted with lightning bolts in one hand and a mace or a club in the other.
Yes.
That's why. So same entity, different names in different cultures. That helps us to understand a little bit what we're reading here. But again, that Euphrates River region was a center of cult worship for this entity, Dagon, Enlil, El, Kronos, Saturn, etc.
Well, imagine being a soldier who's deployed in that area at the time that this literally all hell breaks loose.
Yeah, because that's really what is going to happen here. Let's take a break and come back. We'll discuss the description of these entities that are coming across the river.
Yeah.
And we'll also call back to our earlier study on the things that come out of the abyss to see what comparisons we can draw from that comparison. And Unraveling Revelation will continue after this.
Skywatch TV is proud to present the Kingdom Priesthood Sinai to Zion special offer. When you order the new book, Kingdom Priesthood, Preparing and Equipping the Remnant Priesthood for the Last Days, from acclaimed author Dr. Michael Lake, and Sinai to Zion, the untold story of the triumphant return of Jesus, from New York Times best-selling author Joel Richardson, you'll also receive Dr. Michael Lake's 2 previous works, The Shinar Directive, Preparing the Way for the Son of Perdition, and The Sheereth Imperative, Empowering the Remnant to Overcome the Gates of Hell, absolutely free. Sold separately, these items hold a retail value of over $90. Yours now for your donation of only $35 plus shipping and handling. Now's your chance to get prepared for the prophetic days ahead. The Kingdom Priesthood Sinai to Zion special offer, available now at skywatchtvstore.com. Order now or call 1-844-750-4985.
Here are the upcoming conferences and events featuring the team from Skywatch TV. For a full list and complete information, log on to skywatchtv.com/events or download our free mobile app for iOS and Android devices and Amazon Kindle Fire tablets. We have links to the app stores posted at skywatchtv.com.
Welcome back to Unraveling Revelation from Skywatch TV. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and we are praying that we'll get to go to Israel in October of 2021, and we want you to go with us. You can sign up at skywatchinisrael.com, and no matter when you're watching this, if we are going to Israel, there will be information there for you, and you can still sign up. So if it's 5 years from now and we've got another tour going, then why not sign up then? And who doesn't want to be in Israel when things start breaking loose? I mean,
no better place.
No better place, and it's actually a very safe place to be. The other thing I'm going to tell you about is that Giants, Gods, and Dragons is still available from skywatchtvstore.com. There's an amazing offer there, so please go there. This book, if you find what we're talking about interesting, well, we write about it in this book, and I explore these ideas in fiction form in my Red Wing Saga series, and book 7 just came out. It is available only through Amazon. So if you have read the first 6 books and you want the 7th book, you'll need to go to Amazon to get it there. But if you've not read those books and you say, hey, where do I get those? I don't want to go to Amazon for those. If I can get a deal, you can. Books 1 through 6 are part of our veneration package. So go to skywatchtvstore.com and type in Gilbert, and you'll get all sorts of information.
Yes, and King's Gambit, along with the rest of the Red Wing Saga, plus my 2 new novels, The God Conspiracy and Iron Dragons, are part of the Kindle Unlimited program. So if you've got a subscription to Amazon's Kindle Unlimited program, you can read them for free.
You can. That's how I read almost everything. It's amazing. I even read my own stuff through Kindle Unlimited. So why not? Well, tell us about these things.
Revelation 9, beginning at verse 16, again, the number of mounted troops was twice 10,000 times 10,000. I heard their number. And this is how I saw the horses in my vision.
Interesting that he says, I heard the number.
That means there's something significant about it.
Yeah, exactly.
We have to confess, we haven't ciphered out exactly what that is just yet, except to point out that it's way more than the 3 million soldiers in the Chinese military. And this is how I saw the horses in my vision and those who rode them. They wore breastplates the color of fire and of sapphire and of sulfur, and the heads of the horses were like lions' heads, and fire and smoke and sulfur came out of their mouths.
Okay, so these are entities riding on other entities.
That's how it sounds, yes. The horses and the heads of the horses were like lions' heads. So the mounted troops presumably are on top of the horses in his vision.
In Revelation 6, we have 4 riders that come out.
Yes.
We've talked about those already on this. You can find those programs in the archives. But they were on regular horses.
Mm-hmm.
These aren't regular horses.
No.
These sound like, I don't know, chimeras or something.
They sound like...
Except the chimera had a goat in it. Goat had a serpent tail.
Right.
And a lion. It was a lion, goat, and a serpent combined.
Theriomorphic is the scholarly term. Yeah, combination human-animal. But...
Therion means beast. So beast-morphic, like a beast.
The comparison, well, we'll finish the description here, and then we'll compare them back to the things that fly out of the abyss. Let's see, I skipped back to the locusts there. Here we go. By these 3 plagues, interesting, fire, smoke, and sulfur. By these 3 plagues, a third of mankind was killed by the fire and smoke and sulfur coming out of their mouths. For the power of the horses is in their mouths and in their tails, for their tails are like serpents with heads, and by means of them they wound. Now, this is really strange.
They are not Chinese.
No. And I've seen well-respected scholars making a good guess.
Making a plausible case.
For some sort of natural explanation for these. But when you look at the way demonic entities are described in the world of the ancient Mesopotamians, this is really not all that unusual. We've talked about the scorpion men in previous programs. Mm-hmm. We talked about the things coming out of the abyss and argued that those are, in fact, the titans of Greek mythology, the watchers of the Hebrews who were condemned to the abyss for their sin at Mount Hermon, Genesis 6.
In the book of 1 Enoch, we see that the watchers were sinning with all sorts of animals.
Yeah, and that's one of and this is speculation here, because we understand the Book of Enoch is not scriptural canon. It's not in the Bible for a reason. The Holy Spirit did not lead the early church to include it in the canon.
Right, but it does give you an idea of what was believed at the time.
That is true. And there's a reference in 1 Enoch chapter 7 of how the watchers, these angels who sinned, not only ate up the produce of humanity, then they began to sin against the birds and the beasts. So we know that the sin that they committed with human women was a sexual sin, which produced the giants, the Nephilim, the mighty men who were of old. Did they do the same thing with the animal kingdom? Is this where the stories among the Greeks and Romans of centaurs and satyrs came from?
Right. It's chapter 7, verse 5, and they began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish, and to devour one another's flesh.
Now these are the giants, rather. I misspoke. I said that these were the fallen angels who sinned against
No, these are giants.
These are the giants. These are the half-breed offspring of the watchers and human women. So they began to sin against the birds and the reptiles and the fish.
Well, let me just read the whole passage. And all the others together with them took unto themselves wives, and each chose for himself one. And they began to go in unto them, and to defile themselves with them. And they taught them charms and enchantments, and the cutting of roots, and made them acquainted with plants. And they, the women, became pregnant, and they bare great giants, whose height was 3,000 ells. We don't really know what that is. That's the best translation of the scripture, the manuscript that Charles had at the time. Mm-hmm. Who consumed, these giants, all the acquisitions of men. And when men could no longer sustain them, and the giants turned against them and devoured mankind, and they, the giants, began to sin against bird and beasts and reptiles and fish, and devour one another's flesh, and drink the blood. Then the earth laid accusation against the lawless ones.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff in here that's really like, okay, I could spend an entire book on this one chapter.
Yeah. So the question then is, again, this is sheer speculation, and we don't have an answer for this.
No, we really don't.
Is it possible that this is where the stories of satyrs and centaurs and other chimeric creatures came from in the ancient world? The scorpion men of the Mesopotamians, the bison men, the mermen and merwomen. I forget what they're even called in Sumerian. I mean, the bison men are Kusariku. Yeah. Remember that. But anyway, we don't know. We honestly don't know. And it's not in the Bible, so we're not going to make a doctrine on it and stake our...
No, but we do know that they have tails like serpents.
Yes.
Heads like lions. And they are described as horses. Mm-hmm. So one can assume either their body is a horse, or
right.
they are performing the task of a horse, because this is a cavalry.
Right. And that is something that we should point out, because we do know from Mesopotamian records that horses were considered war animals, not beasts of burden. In fact, there are Amorite texts in which a king was advised by one of his advisors that my lord should honor his kingship by riding a donkey. That's, by the way, why Jesus rode a donkey's colt into Jerusalem. That was what kings rode. Soldiers rode horses. Kings rode on donkeys, because donkeys were, well, almost venerated. They were honored in Amorite culture, which dominated the ancient Near East, because they made travel across the desert possible. And
exactly.
They made it possible to ship goods across the desert.
And these spiritual entities, these horses, they make it possible for these Rephaim, for the demons, to cross over from the netherworld.
Right, and that's the other thing we need to point out, is that the Rephaim in the pagan cultures around ancient Israel were depicted as chariot warriors or cavalry soldiers, who then would cross from the land of the dead to the land of the living.
Which I think,
on their horses.
I think that is an argument for this being a 200 million Rephaim demonic horde that is crossing over on beasts that are terrifying.
Yes, and the description from the early part of Revelation 9, the things that come out of the abyss, the watchers, and these horses, the description of the horses, Revelation 9, 17 through 19, they wore breastplates the color of fire and sapphire and sulfur. The heads of the horses were like lions' heads, that is. The locusts that come out of the abyss earlier in Revelation 9 are described as having teeth like lions' teeth and wearing breastplates of iron, but not the color of fire, sapphire, and sulfur. These horses carrying these 200 million, the power of the horses is in their mouths and in their tails, for their tails are like serpents with heads, and by means of them they wound. The entities, the locusts from the abyss, they have tails and stings like scorpions, and their power to hurt people for 5 months is in their tails. So there are some similarities there, but also some differences.
We're not going to be able to do all of this week, so we're going to continue this next week, because I want to talk about the typical portrayal of dragons. We've discussed it before.
Right,
but sometimes you have lion-headed dragons, and they breathe fire.
That's very true. In fact, the sacred animal for the chief god of Babylon, Marduk, was the lion serpent, or the lion dragon, the Mushushku.
Easy for you to say.
my ancient Akkadian is a little rusty. So, yeah, there are. That is something we'll need to explore and dig into a little deeper for next week, because the imagery that John was inspired to use, would have been familiar to his readers.
Absolutely. And speaking of mysteries and digging in, we want to remind you a brand new program, the Bible's Greatest Mysteries, is going to be on Skywatch TV beginning in a few months, so stay tuned for more announcements. We've got a Facebook page, so if you are still on Facebook, I know some of you have left. If you're still there, go like our page and keep up with all our stuff.
Yeah, we will be posting updates as we get closer to an actual launch date. We're still in pre-production, which means all the logistical things, like where do we run the wiring, where do we hang the lights, and so forth.
Yeah.
But we're working towards getting that launched, and it will be sooner rather than later. We're very excited about it and really looking forward to digging deeper into the mysteries explained by the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. And we thank you for watching. This is Unraveling Revelation from Skywatch TV.
Unraveling Revelation is part of Skywatch TV, a viewer-supported ministry. To learn more about Skywatch TV and the work of our sister ministry, Whispering Ponies Ranch, please visit our website, skywatchtv.com.